welcome to another episode on the UX Our Minds podcast. And today I'm happy to introduce to you Tess Robinson. She's our first dedicated UX researcher, so really looking forward to getting her insights and advice from a UX research specific point of view. So really looking forward to today. She's a great character, a great person. So I really enjoyed speaking with Tess. So really looking forward to sharing this podcast. And yeah, sit back, enjoy, and let's get into the interview. Okay, so thank you, Tess, for agreeing to come on today. I appreciate it. Do you want to maybe give a bit of an introduction as to, who you are, where you come from, kind of how you got into being a UX researcher?
Sure. I'm Tess Robinson, and I currently work at Cognizant as a senior user researcher. I'm based in London, and yeah, how I got into research and UX is like just as eclectic as most people. I studied music and drama with a focus on musical theatre. So I was, and as a child, I worked professionally in theatre and film and TV. Okay. So I was very much kind of like gearing up for that sort of career. But obviously it's a very competitive one and a famously unstable one from a financial point of view. Towards the end of my university years, I was looking for something else to go into. And I actually initially started working in like arts administration and like community outreach and participation. And the only kind of jobs for that were really in like charities and universities, which is very slow and bureaucratic, which anyone who knows me is like, that's not my style. And I really wanted to work somewhere fast-paced, and young and interesting. And I knew a couple of people who were working in UX at the time, and so I decided to just learn about UX design and started hustling and going to whatever kind of free events I could find. And then I decided to quit my very kind of stable university job and go in on the bottom rung with a tech startup with the hopes that I'd be able to wheedle my way in to UX, which is lucky for me. That's how it happened. And eventually I built up a little portfolio of stuff that I was doing outside of work at hackathons, as well as little things I was being allowed to do at work, and just started chipping away, and eventually was able to get a job as a junior researcher full time, which was great. And so that's how I got into it.
Excellent. So how many years ago was that?
Oh, that was like,
not to give any ages away. That wasn't the intention, but
it was like seven or 8 years ago now. Okay. Yeah,
you're still young.
Yeah, I'm still young. Yes.
Cool. That's cool. So it's a bit of an unconventional way to enter the UX field, kind of, like acting, music, and then eventually you like windows your way into UX. So that's cool. So like, what have you been able to maybe bring from kind of that background that you have? Because speaking to other researchers, there seems to be like a wide variety of researchers and their backgrounds. Like I came from IT, then education, then eventually UX research. You tell me music, the music industry, acting, that theatre. So what have you been able to maybe bring, maybe skill sets or things like that?
It's really like, the more I look into it, the more I realize how perfect a background it is for UX research, which I think a lot of people don't expect me to say. But for me, with research, you could be the best researcher in the world, but if people don't listen to you when you communicate the insights that you've generated, it's pointless.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what I think is the best crossover with theatre and with acting, because the one thing I've had no shortage of experience in is getting up in front of a group of people and speaking about something.
Yeah.
I was the person in class that people hated, because when the teacher was like, okay, who wants to go first and tell us about their work or whatever, I would be the one to be like, yes, I'll go first, like, pick me.
Actually, I was happy for people like you, because I just wanted to go last.
So the background in acting and performance is actually really great. And a few more of the things that it really complements is, especially on the qualitative side, things like rapport building, being able to improvising is like so perfect, because having to make conversation on the fly, or being able to recall things that you've been talking about and create a connection between that and what you're talking about now is really great. And the whole idea of analyzing human behavior is deeply rooted in acting and in theatre. Being able to infer from someone's body language or behavior what they may be feeling has been kind of critical in research. So it's very surprising just how well suited it is, and I think it's something that I've played up a lot in kind of my own personal USP as a researcher, is that I will happily speak to people, whoever, whether they're, you know, massively senior C-suite people, or if they're, you know, frontline users. It doesn't faze me in the slightest to be able to speak to them about work that I've done.
You'll be the first one to volunteer.
Exactly. It's and I enjoy it, which is, I think, something that not everyone does enjoy. So yeah.
That's cool. Excellent. So maybe sticking with talking about obviously the different facets of UX research, from presenting results, findings, etc., to interviews. What would you say is the biggest challenge you've found as a UX researcher? That could be a part of what you do now, or it could be entering the field, or whatever. What has been the biggest challenge for you?
Like, for me personally, it's definitely managing my own attention span. I have ADHD, so I get bored of things really quickly, and I need things to be really stimulating, whether that's kind of intellectually, that's the word. Whether that's
both could work,
intellectually,
intellectually, both work.
How ironic to get that word wrong. So whether it's intellectually, or whether it's a particularly exciting or interesting topic, that has been key for me. And as a researcher, the issue there is that when you get tired of something, or bored of something, or fatigued with something, it's difficult to stick it out to see what the results are. And so when you can't communicate what your impact on a project has been because you've decided to leave to do something else exciting, you start to like cannibalize your impact as a researcher. So that is something that I found difficult. I think as well, I'm one of those very classic ambivert people, where I like, naturally I'm very introverted. I get energy from being alone, but I spend energy on being very outgoing and empathizing with people, and that takes a lot of energy for me. So like a day of running interviews and building rapport and keeping up conversation and putting energy into that is super, super tiring. So it's kind of like learning my limit and being able to design for that when I'm doing research has been a challenge, and it's something that I think I still learn from even now.
Okay, that's interesting. Just going back to your comments before about obviously with your ADHD and like maybe attention span, things like that, how have you maybe combated that? Because just going off my experience, sometimes research can be not monotonous, but sometimes when you're going through data and maybe you're doing like going through analytical data, obviously trying to match it out with what users are saying or user behavior, looking at heat maps, that can sometimes be like a bit of a hard slog, and it can be a lot of time maybe alone going through that sort of stuff. And I'm kind of similar. I'm introverted, but I also do get bored quite easily. So how do you kind of combated that, or how do you make it interesting?
Like the number one thing for me is like being open and honest about it with my team and who I'm working with. Like the last thing I want people working with me to feel is like they're nagging me or annoying me by actually reminding me of something really, really useful. Like reminders, I love being chased for stuff, because the more I get chased for stuff, the less likely I am to forget it and look like I'm doing a bad job. So I always appreciate that stuff, and I'm very open about it. But in that being open, you never know who you might find that perfectly complements you. So, you know, I love doing the rapport building and running sessions, running workshops. I'm very much like a doer, whereas other people, it takes a lot of energy for that, and they would much prefer being behind the scenes and doing the organizing and doing the documenting. So being open with people about what you do find interesting means that you have more of a chance again of finding someone who will work really well with you, but also about finding like the best working environments for you. So and I go back and forth. So like sometimes working in-house is the best thing, because you can work on different projects within a brand or within a product or within an organization. But the downside is actually you may not have that much breadth within one product, and so working on the same product or, you know, whatever continuously for years on end could be might not be the best thing for you. Whereas I've now moved into consultancy with the idea being that, you know, you potentially get the opportunity to work with different clients or within different industries, and it's very much expected that you will move around. The flip side of that is that actually, depending on where the funding is and where money is coming in, you might actually end up in the same situation where you work with one client for a very long time. But there's more of an infrastructure to move around and to utilize your skills how you want. It's kind of the midpoint of being a freelancer, which I don't think I'll ever be able to do because I'm so disorganized. But you know, at the moment, consultancy is really working for me. So
cool, excellent. So maybe just sticking with that, are you working in a team of researchers, or are you working more solo?
At the moment, I'm working in a team. I'm working on like a program level piece of government work, which is aiming to kind of address some efficiency issues within like HR and finance systems in government. And because we're working with like 4 of the biggest government departments, it's a lot of users, it's a lot of systems, it's a lot of stakeholders. So there is 4 of us working on that at the moment as a little unit of researchers, which I think is kind of like the ideal amount. Because you're able to bond really well and be open with each other about our strengths and weaknesses. But it's small enough to achieve that, but big enough to be able to kind of delegate work if you need to, or share responsibilities.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Have you worked alone as a researcher?
I have, yeah. I've more often than not, I've been a researcher, kind of team of one,
Yeah,
um, which is great because you get the autonomy.
yeah,
Um,
I know it well.
yeah, I think it depends. It very much depends on the situation. Like working as a
Yeah.
team of one in house, I think is great because
Hmm.
you are very autonomous and you can
Yeah.
carve a role and a niche for yourself. But
Hmm.
working as a team of one, potentially, in a consultancy, depending on the client, can be a challenge because even though you're expected to work on your own, you don't necessarily have I don't know what the right word would be. You're not empowered to make changes because
Okay.
essentially you're
Yeah.
working for the client rather than for
Yeah.
that company
Absolutely.
directly. So you've still got specific responsibilities or objectives to meet as someone who is being contracted. So it's a really different challenge.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I enjoy it all.
Yeah. It's all good at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah.
They involve probably different skill sets, and obviously people have their preferences, whether they prefer to work in a team, like you said before. If it's a smaller team, you're obviously able to work closer with them and maybe build up a rapport with them, and then obviously delegate or ask for help if you need it. But obviously, if you're working alone, you've not got that side. But then you're more empowered to kind of guide the research and how it looks and how you would like to present the findings. So both have kind of pros and cons, I suppose.
Yeah.
Tell me your preference. So which do you prefer, working solo or in a team?
I love working in a small team. I think is
Okay.
the best. I've had a couple of projects where I've worked with a small cohort of researchers, between like
Okay.
3 to 5 of us.
Mm-hmm.
Usually where we're working on the same program or the same brand, but on different projects or work streams within that.
Mm-hmm.
And that I really love because we're close enough to be able to work together if we need it. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, working on separate things means that we're able to pool our resources
Yeah.
and come up with amazing research repositories and code books that we can share. That means that we can really take advantage of each other's expertise.
Absolutely.
So that is awesome. And it's also just like really nice to have other researchers that you can vent to.
Yeah. We're
And
kind of
get
a
advice
rare
from.
breed.
Yeah, for sure. It can be
Like,
super isolating
it
being
can.
the only researcher.
Yeah. Yeah, because you kind of sometimes feel you're always going against the tide, because obviously you're communicating to maybe engineers, to obviously all the various stakeholders that have their own various objectives and things they need to achieve. Obviously, the designers as well, like where I am now. I'm the only researcher where I'm working now, but I've got a really good kind of UX team. So we've got some UX designers, and some of them have background as well in research, which I think is also beneficial as well. Even if they're not a dedicated researcher, if they have a background, or they promote research as well in the work that they do, it's always good to have advocates, because if you're always kind of going against the tide, like you say, it can be a bit isolating.
But I love like going into bat for designers. Like, I don't know if you've had to do this yet, but like I love it when designers come to me and they're like, oh, I'm trying to get this design through or this change through, and like the stakeholders just aren't getting it, or there's certain people within the team who keep coming back to me and questioning. I love going in and being like, boom, the research said this, the users said this, we did this like very controlled, legitimate study on it. Like coming in on a very like cold, data informed kind of front, and being able to lay it down and be like, where's your research that it shouldn't be this way, or where's your research that it should be another way? And like I love going in and being able to help designers, or like any kind of user-centered profession, being able to support them with research is awesome.
and just drop the mic on your way
Yes.
out. No,
Yes, that.
no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's also the empowerment part of UX research. Like you say, you can help your designers kind of get designs through because you're coming with not assumptions that may be coming from other various entities in the organization, but coming to say, yeah, the decision we've made is because of X, Y, and Z, because this is what our users are doing, this is what they're saying, like this is a data-driven decision. And in the end, obviously the business goals will be achieved if you're making data-driven decisions, from my point of view.
Yeah, and it's easy as a researcher to be able to go and say, like, look, this is the way that we work. We are evidence-based. And a line that I love pulling out is like, I'm not saying no.
Yeah.
But like, I need to see evidence that this is something that users want or meets their needs. And if you don't have that evidence, that is absolutely fine. But we need to create that evidence. So
absolutely,
you'll have to let me go and do some research so that we can have justification for this. And where you start to kind of commission your own work.
Absolutely. Cool. Maybe just something for like our listeners who are maybe thinking about entering UX or thinking about being a UX researcher. Hopefully you are. Or trying to find your first job. Maybe they've done some training or they're learning and they're finding it hard to find their kind of niche, or they're finding it hard just to maybe get an interview. What advice would you give to those ones? Maybe thinking about young Tess when you were kind of making that transition over. You're still young. It's not young Tess.
That was not what that was for, but I appreciate that. What I would say is, and it's a line that I always pull out, and advice that I always give, I think I've said the same to you in the past, is like, no one is going to sell you better than you sell you. And you don't have to be the best researcher in the world. But as long as you can have confidence in yourself and sell your skills and your uniqueness better than the next person, you'll always get a job. So it's really about self-reflection and having a think about what it is that makes you unique and what specialism, even if you're super junior and have no experience, there will be something about you that makes you different from every other candidate for that job. For me, it was, well, I've never conducted a research study before, but I can guarantee that the other people who are applying for this job don't have the experience that I do in getting up and communicating insights and making people listen. So it's about finding, and it's a very kind of sales thing, but it is about finding that USP and being confident in talking to people about it. Like, never ever underselling yourself as a candidate, as a researcher. That is what I would always say.
Yeah, absolutely.
For people starting out, because I think that people probably get enough advice about knowing your methodologies and reading certain books. But as someone who is like really bad at reading books and like reading stuff, like being able to say, like, you can just look inwards and reflect on what you do already without having to go and kind of try and add things to what you already offer, I think is really important advice for people to hear.
Absolutely. Like you say, you mentioned a few skills there and parts of UX research, methodologies, those sorts of things you can learn and you will learn once you do get a job, even if it's your first job. Those things you'll learn, everyone will eventually learn those and will be able to do those and research studies, etc. So I like that point, being able to kind of not sell yourself in the sense of like in a business transaction, but kind of just highlight the skills that you bring to the table, because we all have different skills. Whether, like you said before, you're introverted, I'm introverted, but you've come from theatre, I've come from education. We all have different things that we can bring to the table, and even if you've not got any work experience prior, you still have your personality, and your personality will bring different things to the table. So
100%. That's something never ever to underestimate. Like a lot of friends say to me, like, when after they've left a job, that they've been told like, oh, I really miss your energy in meetings or in the team. Like, don't underestimate energy and vibe and personality, because it definitely goes a long way.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you, Tess. I'll end it here because I've already taken probably too much of your time and I don't want to bore you, but so no, I appreciate you giving up your time to share kind of your experience and also your advice.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Maybe we can bring you back for part 2 in the future.
Do it.
So thank you for listening to today's podcast. Again, I was really happy to share that. I had a lot of fun, and yeah, maybe we'll have part 2 in the next few months with Tess. So again, thank you to Tess, and also to you guys for listening. Obviously, you can like, subscribe, follow wherever you listen to your podcast. We're on Spotify, or on Google Podcasts, or on Amazon Music, Apple Music, wherever. So like, share as well, so we can reach as many new UX students, juniors as possible. And yeah, thanks again for listening. And that's the end of the UX Our Minds podcast.